Hello, everyone. Sorry for the bit delay, but we are now live on YouTube. This is Alan Gilman for TorahBytes Live. This week, we are looking at the Torah portion. What I do every week is for many years, I've been doing a short message. In Hebrew, the term is Devar Torah, a word from the Torah. The Torah is the 5 books of Moses. And for a long, long time, the readings of the books of Moses have been done on an annual cycle in synagogues all over the world. And it's quite common to provide a thought for the week. And that's what I've been doing since the fall of 1997. And more recently, I've been doing these TorahBytes live broadcasts, where I take some of what I was referencing in the message of the week that came out last Tuesday, a couple of days ago, and I talk about it a little bit more during this time. And so this week's Torah portion, the title of it is Korach. In English, that's Korah, and he's one of the main characters that comes up in this reading. The reading takes us from Bamidbar, the book of Numbers. That's the 4th book of Moses, chapter 16, verse 1 through chapter 18, verse 32. The accompanying reading from the prophets, the Haftorah reading, is 1 Shmuel, 1 Samuel 11, 14 through 12, 22. What I focused on in the message is the story of Korach, or Korah, who challenged Moses with regard to some of the administrative setup of the priesthood. And what happened is the way it worked is there was one of the tribes of Israel that was set aside for the service that had to do with the sacrifices in the area called the Mishkan, or the tabernacle, which is the precursor to the temple. And the people who were set aside to take care of that aspect of the life of ancient Israel was the tribe of Levi, or Levi, the same tribe that Moses was from. Levi was one of the 12 sons of Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. That's why they're called the 12 tribes of Israel. And so Levi, or Levi, was chosen to take care of this sacrificial system. Now, there is a subset of Levi, the Kohanim, or the priests. That's where we get the name Kohen, or Cohen, the Jewish last name Cohen. It's a very common Jewish last name, and it means priest. The priests were the ones who actually did the sacrifices and had particular functions within the Mishkan, later on the temple. The Kohanim, the priests, were descended from Moses' brother Aaron. So the Kohanim were a subset of the larger tribe of Levi. Now, there was a group of Levites, Leviim in Hebrew, led by this man, Korah, who challenged Moses on the fact that it looked like he was giving preference. We would call that today nepotism, or favoring a family member. And that's why Aaron and his descendants were chosen to be the special class of Kohanim, the priests. And Korah challenges Moses and Aaron on this, and then God, through a special process, confirms that he was the one who chose Aaron and his sons to serve in that special way. And so I looked at this to deal with a current societal issue, and it has to do with the issue of equality or equity. That the whole idea that life is not fair. And that's what Korah was saying. He was challenging Moses on this. You're not being fair. This is not fair. Why should Aaron and his descendants be the ones chosen for this special task? Why not us? I remember years ago when we were trying to start a congregation, when we were living in the Vancouver area. In the very early days, we were having a meeting to discuss what we're going to do. Up to that time, we had some social gatherings and some Bible studies and this sort of thing, but we were looking into turning our more informal and less regular gatherings into something that was ongoing, weekly thing. And one of the people who were keen to be involved, we're having a meeting, was at our house. And at some point, he challenged those of us who had been involved in various leadership roles up to that point, and he said he wanted to lead the group. And the way he put it is you all have had a turn. Now it's my turn. And it wasn't about qualifications. It wasn't about experience. It was at the time, it was more along the lines of it reminded me of you're playing in a game, a board game. Why do you always have to go first? That's not fair. I should have a turn to go first, and that sort of thing. And sometimes those things happen, like the kid in the schoolyard who owns the soccer ball, he makes the rules, kind of idea. That's not really fair, because why should just the ownership of the ball mean that he's the person in charge? And I don't want to, as we're talking about this topic of fairness, belittle that there are some real issues of injustice that do need to be dealt with. And whether we learn that on the schoolyard or in the boardroom or in our legislatures, in our religious organizations, in our families, there are places to talk about injustice and not being fair. But the way this is being pursued today, uh, I believe is somewhat misguided. And we're going to look at some scripture that I believe is going to help us with the fact that life isn't fair. And so equality has become a major value for many today and has become synonymous with justice. So the idea that um, the way it's referred to today is what people seem to want more and more is called equality of outcome. And this is what I was thinking of in the illustration that I gave that I tried to be a little funny, try to be satirical on my TorahBytes message this week, is my experience being at this track and field day with all these kids. I hadn't been to one of those in a long time. I immediately remembered what it was like when we had what we called field day at the end of our school years. I grew up. I remember used to losing sleep. I was so excited that we were finally having field day. Not that I was any good at it. And maybe that's a little bit that kind of triggered me the other day when I attended this thing. And so, as I mentioned in the message, and you can go to my TorahBytes.org site if you haven't read this week's message yet. But the first thing that struck me was the fact that they had ribbons all the way through fifth place. And think about it a little more. That's probably quite common. I've heard of things. I've heard of sporting events for kids where they don't keep score, giving ribbons for and trophies for all sorts of accomplishments and non-accomplishments. You get recognition for just showing up, for just simply being alive, this sort of thing. And the more recent generations of children have been showered with all sorts of accolades and awards and rewards for not doing all that much. And I do believe that every human being should be acknowledged. Every human being should be properly valued. But when we're dealing, especially in a realm of competition and achievement, to flatten it all out, to make it appear that that everybody is accomplishing the same thing. So it doesn't really matter if you're faster than the other child. Everybody gets the same kind of acknowledgement, and I find that's not really reckoning with reality. But anyway, there I was at one point, and I just happened to see one of the races, the ends of one of the races of one of the younger children's groups. Maybe the child was 5, 6 years old, maybe a little bit older. Anyway, this little boy was tearing around the final curve of the track and leaving all the rest of the kids in his wake. Like there was no competition. Like this child was way better than any of the other kids. And at the moment, I thought that this child had some sort of genetic advantage, that clearly his athleticism was far more better, for lack of a better term. he was just better at it than anybody else. There was no comparison whatsoever. And at the time, I looked at this and I was looking and going, "That's not fair. Like, why should this kid get to race with all the other kids who are in a completely different class?" And in high level amateur sports and professional sports, there are classifications, but they're not there. Well, I guess it's there somewhat make the competition fair in this right sort of way. So you have in wrestling and boxing, you've got weight classes, you've got age level type competitions to make these things more fair, but more fair that there's a real competition going on. You don't end up with such a incredible disparity between the winners and the losers. But still, these children were put in their age groups. They were separated according to sex or gender, depending what word you want to use. And this child was way better than any of the other kids. That's just the way that it is. And, I mentioned the genetic advantage, and that's possible. It's possible that this child possessed from the moment of fertilization, physical advantages that other children don't have when their DNA comes together. There might be other things too. It's possible that this child was more experienced in running. It's possible that he was either given genetically or taught to have a will to win that the other children didn't have. I didn't interview him or his parents, but this is just the way it is. This is the way it is in life. We're not all the same. And because we're not all the same, why should we expect equality of outcome? We could try to force that upon the society, upon people, but is that what we really want? We talk about fair. Is that fair? Is it fair to reward greater accomplishments in the same way as we reward less accomplishments? And so anyway, I want to look at that a little bit closer. And there's actually some scripture that we're going to look at right now. We're going to do that right now. So what I want to do is we're going to look at a pretty well-known parable from the Gospels, from the New Testament. It's a story that Jesus told to help illustrate some of the dynamics of the kingdom of heaven. He's speaking here about this concept of the kingdom of heaven, which I understand to be the ways of the rule of God. And that's partly what he came to do, or mainly what he came to do is when the Messiah came, he came to reestablish God's rule on earth. And we who trust in him have the opportunity to experience what that means and to share what that means with other people and to call people into the reality of God's rule on earth, his kingdom. And so I'm going to read this parable and comment as we go along. And so again, if you're just joining us, we're looking at the topic of fairness and life isn't fair. That's just the way it is. We come into this world, we are different. We are our wiring, our DNA, whatever you want to call it, from the moment of fertilization, each and every human being, we are equal in value, we are equal in worth, but we're not equal in ability and capability. And then in our life experiences are all different. We were born into the world with different kinds of advantages. That's just the way it is. And I know a lot of people want to smooth that out, that it doesn't matter what family you're born into. It doesn't matter what background you have, what history you have. It seemed to be unfair that some people are born into levels of advantage. And even if we were able to equal out some of those advantages, we don't live in a world that is actually fair. We are different from one another. And I actually think that's by design. And that's one of the things that this parable helps us to see. So I'm going to read and comment as we go through it. So this is Matthew chapter 25, verse 14 through verse 30. And this is Yeshua the Messiah speaking. For it will be like, that's the kingdom of heaven, will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. And so here Yeshua is likening the kingdom of heaven, the rule of God, and the dynamics therein, similar to a business owner who's going off on a journey, and he calls his servants or his employees, that kind of idea, and he entrusts them with resources. And the word uses talents, and the talents were Roman and Greek form of currency, and they were actually the precious metal. You could have had talents of gold or talents of silver. It doesn't say which one. Either way, he was entrusting his servants with quite a bit of monetary resource. A talent of gold in today's money would be around $1 million. It's not exact, but you get the idea. And if it was silver, it'd be something like $16,000. So when we think of the servant who was entrusted with only 1 talent, relatively it was much less than the one that had 5. It was 50% less compared to the one who had 2. But even he was given a significant amount of money to work with. And to the original hearers, they would get this right away, that he was given enough to fund an entire business enterprise, the one that had only 1 talent. And the one who was given a 5 was given way more. So don't think that one was given $10 and the other one was given a nickel, 5 cents. It's not that kind of thing. They were all given a lot of money to work with. So then he goes away, and then we're told at verse 16, he who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more, doubled the investment. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. Same kind of idea. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now notice the third person with only the 1 talent, he didn't lose it. He didn't lose it, period. He actually put it in in what's the word I'm looking for? You can't tell me because you're not talking back. Safekeeping. Okay, verse 18. I read that. Verse 19. Now, after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he would receive the 5 talents, came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have 5 talents more. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. Now, when he says faithful with a little, he's not commenting on having been given 5 talents. It's the fact that in comparison to the responsibilities and the benefits and the rewards that he will have as a result of his successful business venture, that the results of his investment success is compared to what he originally had is great. And so there's great reward for him using his resources well. And the same thing happens with the second person with the 2 talents. Where am I here? He also said to the one with the 2 talents, verse 22, he came forward saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I've made 2 talents more. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. Now, we don't really know. We can't compare the benefits, results, rewards of the person with the 5 who now came back with 10 and the person with the 2 who now has 4. It almost sounds like the 2 of them were rewarded in the exact same way. We don't know if that's true, but certainly the experience of the 2 of them are similar, that they successfully invested what they were given. And it's not so much that, oh, you've got 10, you're better than the one who now has 4. That's not here at all. There's an equal response to the success of the 2 of them, that in each case, they effectively used what they were given. And while the the sum of the first one was greater than the second, the response of the master is identical to the two of them. That's so important. Each of them used the resources that they were given and were seen as accomplishing the similar level of success. So you're rewarded not on the basis of what you have achieved, it's the relationship of what you've achieved with what you started with. And I should have mentioned this at the beginning, how this word talent in English became to be used as ability, about having talents. And it actually it goes back all the way to this parable of Yeshua, who was using talents to talk about the resources given to these people and how they use them. And so that's why the word talent, which meant money, came to be used as a way to describe ability. Okay, let's get to the third fella. Where are we here? Okay, verse 20, read that. Okay, verse 24. He also had received the one talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. Okay, so this guy was afraid because he had this understanding, a perception of his boss. He knew what his boss was like. And the way he describes it is that he's a hard man, reaping where he doesn't sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. That's, if you really think about that, he's attributing to this master kind of like this kind of tricky, I don't know if I should say shifty, is it dishonest? Kind of, it's that he gets what he wants through all sorts of means. And at least his master is very, very unpredictable. The master gets his way. And he knew he was dealing with a hard and shrewd master. And so he was so concerned of what might happen if he would lose the one talent, should he invest it and then it would result in some sort of loss, that he thought the best way to deal with his master was to take care of the one talent, to hide it away, keep it safe, and so that he could at least restore to him that which had been entrusted to him. But look at how the master responds. But his master answered him, verse 26, you wicked and slothful servant. Wow. Wicked and slothful. Like, it's not like he didn't do anything. It's not, if we told the story today, we would expect the servant to come up with kind of like, oh, I forgot, I was getting around to it, I fell asleep. And again, we would probably write the parable in terms of him losing the one talent. But that's not the story here. He gave back the master exactly what the master had entrusted him, but he calls his servant wicked and slothful. And then, surprise, he affirms the servant's perspective of himself. The master says, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I scattered no seed. So he affirms the servant's perspective. He doesn't say to him, I'm not really that way. You know that I'm a nice guy. You know, I would have been understanding if this would have happened or that would have happened. He actually affirms the servant's perspective. You know, I'm a hard master. You know, I get what I want. You know that I may not be fair. You know all that. Then how come, he said, then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming, I should have received what was my own with interest. And interesting, he doesn't tell him, well, you should have gone out there and done this huge risky thing and come back with triple or quadruple of the talents. He doesn't say that. He even mentions he could have done the safe thing, or also a safe thing, but a safe thing that would have at least had a return to it. But that's not what he did. All the servant could think of is, I'm dealing with a hard master, and therefore, I should do what I can to make sure I don't lose what he entrusted to me. And for many of us, that makes sense. that sounds like somebody's trying to be responsible, but not according to the master. The master calls him wicked and slothful. He should have done at something, even the bare minimum, that would have at least brought some return, but that's not what the master did. So let's see what the master does. Verse 28, so take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. Whoa, that's harsh. It gets worse. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place, there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, I don't want to get sidetracked with what does the Bible teach about hell. But all I want to say in the context of this parable and how it relates to what we're talking about this morning, he sends the servant that buried the talent to what looks like hell. What? This servant was responsible enough to hide away and keep safe that which was entrusted to him, and look at the response he's given. He's told off, what he has is taken away, and he suffers eternally as a result. Now, maybe that you might find that offensive, but let's get the point of the story here. Life isn't fair. People are allotted different resources, not all the same, not all the same kind, not all the same quantity. You've met those people. You met those people that succeed at almost everything they do. They're physically better at things. They're more athletically capable, intellectually better, financially they have a knack for making money. You hear about these people. They start a business, they sell it. They start another business, they sell it. Maybe they've lost money along the way, and then they recover. And then others, we try this, that, and the other thing, and nothing ever works. Why? And how do we deal? How do we deal with that fact? Some people don't have the intellectual prowess of others. One of our kids currently, our children, and in case you don't know, we have 10 children, and they age range from it's 37 down to 14. I hope I got that right. It's not in my notes, and they're all different, and I could just spend some time talking about that. But one of them currently has a very significant debilitating disease. Life's not fair. But to watch how she's dealing with it, that seems to be what life is supposed to be, one big aspect of what life is supposed to be all about. We're dealt a hand, just using a card illustration, and when you're dealt a hand in cards, they're not all the same. You could create a game where you start off with all the same cards and see what you're going to do with it. Sure. But most of the time, you're dealt out a hand, and everybody, it's different. We're all dealt a different hand in life. We're given different talents, different resources to work with. It's not fair. That's just the way it is. And, even if there was some justification for trying to equal out people's lives, we're not going to change the fact that we're different. We have different capabilities. And the way he describes the master, I think we better be, got to be careful, because it does seem that the master here is supposed to be God. God does this. The Messiah does this. He leaves resources to his people to use. And we got to be careful, because while the metaphor is illustrating something very real. We got to be careful not to go too far in how we fully understand, because there's more to God and his ways than simply this parable. But still, what the third servant, the one who's called lazy, good for nothing, the way he describes the master is actually a way that accurately describes life. Life, the way we know life, it throws at us things that are so unfair. It seems to shell out opportunities to some people, and then other people experience tragedy after tragedy and disappointment after disappointment, and people are let down, and other people seem, all these golden opportunities are given. That's just the way it is. What are we supposed to do about it? The parable tells us, use whatever you have. In fact, risk using whatever you have. Now, we don't know what would have happened if the third servant had not even gone to the bank, but actually tried to do something with the talent, and then it didn't work out. We don't have that information, but we have the rest of the Bible. And from God's perspective, taking a risk and blowing it in the grand scheme of things is no big deal. And then we can look at the people who have been truly successful. And many of them, there are all sorts of stories of some of the most successful people ever in history, how they failed and failed and failed before they actually knew success. And so we could surmise that failure is part of the pathway to success. And that's something that the third servant didn't want to reckon with. That for him, failure was not an option. So instead of risking in order to possibly succeed, he decided to hide away that which he had and keep it safe so that he wouldn't lose it. And yet that is called wicked. That's wicked, according to this story. And how many of us are, we're kind of waiting for the world to become fair. We're waiting for people to finally give us that silver platter that we're waiting for. We're waiting for something rather than taking whatever we have. And it might be one talent. It may not be 5 or 2. It may just be 1 or a half or a 10th. I don't know what you've been given. I'm still trying to discover what I've been given. But whatever you've been given, instead of looking at the other person and seeing what they've done and comparing yourself to them and wondering why you have not been given more. If only if you were given more circumstantially, ability-wise, or whatever it might be, then your life might be different. That's not the perspective that the Lord wants us to have. The perspective he wants us to have is to use whatever we've got. If it's a lot, we'll use that. If it's only a little bit, use that. And we know from the first two that the response of the master, whether we end up with lots or less, as long as we use what we've been given, then the reward it's the same. Now, it may not be identical, and there's other scriptures that give the impression that depending on how we live, so will our eternity be. It'll make a difference. And some people might want to think that the unfairness of life is all because of the broken nature of the world, sin and the curse. But it isn't. That even in the age to come, there's going to be differences. And that's part of God's design. We know in the Garden of Eden, God created differences. The animals were different from the people. And there was a man and a woman that were different. They had different roles, different functions. And so even in a more perfect environment, there are differences. And what we're called to do is use our differences wisely and as effectively as possible. And I think, in some ways, we got to forget about this fairness thing. Now, there are true injustices in the world, and there are things that we should be speaking out against and things that we should be doing to rectify true injustice. But we're not talking about that right now. We're not talking about those things. And we're talking really now at the very individual level. And maybe you're someone to whom great injustice has been done. Maybe, you understand the words of the third servant, that the master has been really hard with you. And you've observed this, that life isn't fair. Well, what are you going to do about it? You're going to complain? You're going to point your finger at other people, the should have, would have, could haves of your life? Are you going to sit in an old folks home one day and talk about what people should have done? And if only this and if only that? Is that what's going to happen? Maybe you're doing it right now. You don't have to. You've got what you've got. You've got resources at your disposal right now, and you can use them. And you could use them well. If you compare them to what people are doing with what they have, maybe it'll pale in comparison. But compared to yourself, compared to what you have been entrusted with, you can do something with your life. And you could start right now. Right now. You could start right now by praying. You could start right now by if you have been having a pity party and feeling sorry for yourself because you don't have what other people have, you could start by, the Bible calls it repenting. That's turning around and seeing life from God's perspective and ask his forgiveness for how you have squandered what he has given you. Maybe you don't know what you have. It's possible. Well, ask him and he'll shine his light on your talents, whatever they might be. You might possess some abilities that no one's ever thought of before. It's possible, or at least in the way that God wants you to use it. And, maybe your sphere of influence is small. Maybe it's large. That part's not our business. Our business is simply use whatever God's given to us. So first of all, we need to accept that life's not fair, accept that God apportions to different people different capabilities and opportunities. Then ask him how he wants you to use what you have. And in the meantime, use it the best you can and watch what happens. What's the worst that can happen? Especially if we're seeking to go about life God's way. And so use your talents. Whether you have one or more, use what you've got. And let's stop complaining about what we don't have. Well, feel free to comment on this video and share it with others and like it and all the stuff you can do with social media. I'm happy to respond to any of your questions. You can leave questions through the comments, or you can email me at info@TorahBytes.org. Also, you can go to either my TorahBytes site or my Alan Gilman site, alangilman.ca. And if you want to help me make more videos like this, you can donate to what hopefully is a worthy cause and help me use my talents. I'm not going to blame you if you don't contribute. But perhaps that's part of what God's calling you to do. I don't know. You ask him and take it from there. And so until next time, this is Alan Gilman for TorahBytes Live. Don't forget to subscribe if I haven't mentioned that already. Bye.